Welcome to our Year 10 video series on practical investigation and data analysis skills development. In this video, we're going to be looking at how we present our data. To start off with, we're going to look at tables of data. Now, the reason that we use a table is to keep all our information nice and tidy. Otherwise, we could have information spread all over the place on bits of paper, in our book, on computers, but that's not being organised, and we need to use tables to keep everything in a succinct order. So you can see a lovely table here looking at plant growth and pH of soil. So why do we use tables? Well, as I said, to help make sense of lots of data. It's a convenient way. You put all that information together, much better than having it spread on pieces of paper all over the place. Now, sometimes when looking at a table, you may be able to identify a pattern. Even from this table that we're looking at here, we've got 7 different groups of plants and we've got 7 different pHs of soil. And just by looking at this table, we can see that the average plant growth seems to increase as the pH increases to a certain point, the 6.8, pH 6.8, and then it starts to drop. So we can see that pattern just by looking at the table. And as I said, it prevents the issue of having data all over the place or misplacing your data and things like that. Okay, so what we're going to do first of all is we're going to look at some features of our table, some of those names, okay? Because you'll hear people say things about a table or using Excel. You might hear different terms used, and it's really handy if you actually know what those terms mean. So when we're talking about rows, we're talking about the horizontal rows on a table. When we talk about columns, we're talking about the vertical columns, the up and down. So columns go up and down. When you build a column, you build up, okay? So that's a column, rows across. The individual single kind of rectangular shape as such, that's called a cell. So if you're told to enter some data into a cell, that means one of the little boxes. Okay, so a good table should have all of the following. An effective title. Now, when we're talking an effective title, we're not meaning this is the table of results or a table or results tables. That is not an effective title. An effective title actually tells us what that table shows. So, for example, the effects of, and then put your variables in. So the effects of, that's a good title, good effective title. All right, you should have your variables in there. A table should contain at least one independent and at least one dependent variable. There will come a time where you might be looking at more than one, but they should have at least one of each. Both variables should have a measurable unit displayed in the title of each cell. So if you're talking about height, you should have height in centimetres. If you're talking about the number of plants, okay, that's measurable. Now, sometimes if you're looking at categoric data, it may not be with a measurable unit, for example, hair colour or something like that. But in most cases, you should have a measurable unit in each title cell. Remembering, units go in the title, not into the results cells. I'll explain that further in a minute. You need to have repeated trials. You cannot just do an experiment once and make a reliable, informed conclusion on that. Okay, you should have repeated trials, and if you've done repeated trials, then you need to find an average of all those trials. Here is a table I prepared earlier. Okay, I quite like this table. I've got one major issue with this table. I produced this in Excel. Okay, so we've got a good title. I like the title. A table showing the length of time taken, so then we've got seconds in brackets, for different lengths in centimetres of wood to burn. Okay, so we've got 5 different lengths of wood from 5 centimetres through to 25 centimetres. And we have timed how long it takes those pieces of wood to burn. Okay, now the only thing I don't like about this table is this 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5 here. That is showing the trials, okay? So trial 1, trial 2, trial 3, trial 4, trial 5. So the repetitions. Maybe I should have written rep 1, rep 2, rep 3, rep 4, rep 5 in there, because at the moment that actually looks like I'm talking about time taken to burn in seconds, and it's not. It's each trial. So for 5 seconds, we did that experiment once. We did it a second time, a third time, a fourth time, and a fifth time, okay? And these are all seconds in here. You note how that I have not written 3 seconds, 4 seconds, 2 seconds, because if you write the unit into the cell, then in Excel, you can't make the table because there's text. You can't make a graph because there's text in there. But also, if you write the unit in after the number, it makes your table look way too busy. Too much information in there. Tables need to be succinct, tidy, and easy to read. And if you have all the units written in there, it will not be easy to read. So nice and tidily, the units go above. Then I found out the average. Okay, so added them all together and divided by the number of trials to find the average. And just from this little table, we can see a nice pattern there that as the length of wood increased, the length of time taken to burn also increased. All right, now we move on to graphs, because once you've got your table sorted, the next step is to make a graph. So, what type of graph is needed? Well, the answer to this, it depends on the type of data that you've collected. There are so many types of graph, and it's not just choosing the prettiest one that you think looks the nicest. Certain graphs match certain types of data, and that is really important to remember. However, before we get to that, we need to look at types of data, okay? Our first type of data we're going to look at is qualitative data. Okay, and this is data that describes something. It refers to the quality as such of something. There's no numbers involved in this, okay? So for example, you might be looking at colour, likes and dislikes, feelings, shape, texture. So it's not a numerical number, it's a category as such. Then we've got our quantitative data. This is data that has a number value, okay, also a quantity. This data has to have a whole number and a unit to indicate what the value is about. For example, height, speed, mass, temperature, time, frequency. So they're all values. Okay, there's 2 types of quantitative data, all right? There is discrete and continuous, with a little s apparently. It doesn't have a little s, it's the same size s as the rest of the letters, but discrete and continuous. What's the difference between those 2? Let's have a look. Okay, so our discrete, so you see here, we've not got data, it says variable, same difference, okay? So discrete data is data which can take only certain values, all right? Whereas our continuous can take any value in a particular limit, all right? Discrete jumps from one value to another, but it will not consider intermediate values between the 2. So it's like 1, 2, 3, but you couldn't have 1.5 or 1.75 or anything like that. It's actual values, not intermediates. Whereas continuous, you can have those intermediate values. Let's look at that a bit closer. So our discrete data is based on whole numbers of objects. So you can't have your halves, 0.33, no fraction values. So examples of this could be counting the number of people in a room, the number of cats with black fur, and that kind of thing. Things where you're not going to get a 0.5 or a 0.75. You're not going to get 0.5 of a cat that's black. Well, I suppose you could, but you're looking at the whole colour of the cat. With our continuous data, this is numerical data that is collected from measurements. So these values can be measured to fractional amounts with the possibility of having more and more decimal places as the equipment gets better and more precise. Okay, so some examples. The length of a table is 2.4 meters. The height of a mountain, 1,200.54 meters. The mass of an ant, 0.022 grams. Okay. That is the end of this video. In the next one, we actually go on to now looking at the specific types of graphs that you use with your data. So now you know your types of data, and you need that very clear in your head to be able to move on to our next video, which is about graphs.